Alright, you guys, welcome to Season 2 of Little Man Big Conversations. I am, of course, the Little Man, aka James, aka the Flash Man, welcoming you back, finally back for Season 2. It has been a hot minute since I've been downloaded or streamed or listened to in whatever format you've chosen. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming back. Season 1 was quite a success. I had a lot of fun doing Season 1. I know you guys had a lot of fun listening in and hearing the stories. But for those of you out there that are just tuning in for Season 2, haven't been here before, allow me to elaborate. Little Man Big Conversations is a podcast all about entertainers, the world that they live in, the fields that they participate in, and you get to know them behind the curtain, who they are, what they're like, their 9 to 5, and how they came up with the personas that you know and love, and maybe you bought tickets to, bought their merchandise, whatever it is. You've gone and seen them in whatever field, that's why you're tuning in. How'd they get that character? I don't know. Hey, listen to this podcast, you might soon find out. Which brings me to today's guest. I've grown to know, love, and appreciate this man, both inside and outside the squared circle. He is an avid actor, entertainer, and bodyguard to the superstars. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let me give it all away right now. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the debut of Season 2, Episode 1, with the one, the only, Wayne, the Maniac Mattei. Man, so far on this podcast, I've interviewed all creatures and characters from all walks of life. Some people in the wrestling business, some people in the acting business, some people in the modeling business. All of us share a similar walk of life, whether it be wrestling, whether it be performing, whether it be entertaining. Today, I have the esteemed pleasure of not only talking to a guy who has combined, done all these things, acting, entertaining, and wrestling, but is also a protector of some of the world's best known celebrities, those important people that you like following on social media. This guy arguably has been in the background of many of those photos, unbeknownst until today. You'll find out who he is, how it all came about. He is a pro wrestler, a bodyguard, an actor. He has an in-ring wrestling career spanning 16 years. He's been a bodyguard since he was 18. You can see him on YouTube series Maniac, Protector Enforcer. There's 2 episodes of that out now. And he plays the legendary Sergeant Slaughter in the hit TV show Young Rock, both Season 1 and Season 2, and Never Too Late, which, get this, I'm talking a full-length feature film. And guess what? He actually has screen time. He's not holding up a sign in the background. This guy is in it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my esteemed pleasure to welcome to the show today the man known as the Maniac, Mr. Wayne Mattei. Wayne, how are you, man?
Hello, mate. Thank you for that wonderful intro. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Now that we've taken half an hour of people's time.
Now it's the end of the show. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah, lovely to catch up, mate. Always, always a pleasure.
Always.
Now that just as a bit of an edit, did I say your last name right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to keep that in because sometimes with those names pronounced that way and spelt that way, I go, Wayne.
Yeah. I used to get called Mattel. That would be a good one.
No.
I wouldn't be Mattel if I had the Mattel fortune, you know.
Man, we were just talking about before we hit record. Got to get an action figure. Should have been Wayne Mattel.
Wayne Mattel action figure. Would have sold millions. Trust me.
The Maniac action figure. Yes, this has to be a thing. Anyone out there, before we get into this, you're going to want to do it after we finish talking, but anyone out there listening, please get this man a toy. Last name as it is, where is that last name originated from?
Well, it's a funny mix. It was my grandfather on my dad's side, my biological father, who was Syrian.
Okay.
It comes from that background, but then my mother's parents were Swedish. So when you put a Swede and a Syrian together in a milkshake, that is what you see here.
Man, it sounds like the setup to a joke, right? So a Swede and a...
Yeah, it's one time a Swede and
and out came a Maniac.
That's it. There's the punchline, literally.
All right, man. So we want to get through the history of you. Today's episode obviously is about you being on the podcast. As the name entitles, Little Man. Well, it ain't. It's definitely me in this. Never more so than my guest today. But follow up with that is the big conversation. So take me back through growing up as a kid, because you're an intimidating guy in the best way possible. You've got a mean look. You're built. You're a jacked up dude, heavily tattooed. Hey, once you get to know you, heart of gold. But intimidating presence. But hey, I'm going to imagine young baby Maniac yeah, wasn't so much the character that he is now. So take me through it, man. What was growing up like for you?
Well, no tattoos to start with.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh. No, look, I had a pretty good upbringing. It was my mum and my stepdad. I was brought up in a place called Glenelg in Adelaide, which is right down the beach. So I was brought up down by the beach, which was great. I'm an only child, so I had to make friends with people to be able to do stuff on the weekends and bits of it. And I had a few really close friends that lived in the proximity, so that was really nice. Having said that, primary school was great, loved it. I managed to get a job working at a big amusement place down at Glenelg. It was called the Magic Mountain. It's a big water slide place. It had arcade machines, it had rides, it had all that sort of stuff. So from about 13, I was able to work in there and had a great time.
Yep.
High school itself for me was not that good. You know, when I started high school, I was a short little chubby kid that was a big fan of wrestling. And back then, that was kind of a big no-no. So I used to get picked, I had big Hulk Hogan picture on the front of my school diary, and it had Mr. T and all that, because back then, 85, it was around WrestleMania 1. So kids used to pick on me for that and being short and fat and all that sort of stuff. So high school was a bit rough. But when I got to about year 10 or 11, I started to stretch out and get thin. And I started doing some martial arts for a bit of discipline and a bit of self-protection as well. So by the time year 11 had finished, I was still convinced to go back and do year 12. I was a bit more confident in myself. But funny story, I went to the school to register with my mum to get our books and all that for year 12.
Right.
And when we went there, they couldn't find my name on the list.
Huh?
And me and my mum were like, what's going on? And they said, well, we have no record of Wayne being here. And I said, I'll show you. And my homeroom teacher from last year walked past and went, hey, Mr. So-and-so. And he goes, hey, Wayne, how you going? I said, so is that good enough for you? And they said, well, yeah, but we don't have your records anywhere. And I said, well, what's the story now? And they said, well, you're going to have to go back and redo year 11 again.
What?
And I just looked at my mum and I said, that's it, I'm out. And she goes, we walked off and I left and started working full-time at the Magic Mountain after that.
So, I mean, in this day and age, that would be incredibly unheard of. But being that it was the 80s, I'm sure, let's just say, out of context here, I'm sure there's a lot of paperwork that went missing, maybe or maybe not on purpose back in the 80s there. But so to this day, to the best of your recollection, looking back on all those years now, was it ever explained or understood as to where or how that situation even happened? Because, and you were at that school for
the whole time for my high school career, I was at that same school, and it was almost like they basically said, we don't have any of your records, so you're going to have to go back and do year 11. Almost like sweeping it under the rug or making it that, we know he's not going to go back and do year 11 again, so he'll just leave. So not that I was a problem student or a problem child or anything. It was just a case of that I think there was a faux pas in the office that maybe my file got put on the not returning to school pile. And then when I turned up, they're like, oh, shit, we threw that out.
Right. But it's still, that's a lot of paperwork to just sort of, seemingly lose overnight. I mean, was the high school system, was that starting in grade 8 or was it grade 9?
Grade 8.
So yeah, so they've got 8, 9, 10, 11. They've got 4 years worth of, and we're not just, Wayne was here, one piece of paper. We're talking, assignments, reports,
Yep.
I'm sure teachers' offices visits, any sort of incidents report, excursions, legal works, paperwork, everything. And then 4 years just, I don't know.
Gone like that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, hey, anyone listening out there, I'm sure they would share the same feeling of, what, screw this.
That was pretty much the consensus when they said that. And that's why my mother didn't really try and fight me on it when I said, I'm not going back. That's it. I'm just going to go start working full-time instead of casually at this amusement centre. And we were lucky that the manager there was actually personal family friends of ours. So they knew that John would look after me while I was there. So that was my transition from school into the workforce, really.
Were you looking at, if you, looking back on that time now, were you looking at completing high school? Were you happy? Were you motivated to go, hey, man, let's do grade 12, let's do this? Or were you already at that stage going, you know what, school might not be for me? And this sort of helped you to go, yeah, cool, this is my out, this is my out.
Yeah, look, I was happy to do it. I wouldn't say I was ecstatic about doing year 12 because I had no direction at that time on what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't an academic. I was reasonably good at tech studies, woodwork and stuff like that. My grandfather used to be an upholsterer. and I was interested in maybe pursuing that. I didn't really know where or what I was going to do, so I didn't have something to focus on. I was doing the casual work at the arcade, which I enjoyed. Playing video games, all that sort of stuff. For me, yeah, it was good fun, but it was a casual job. But it wasn't a career. I didn't want to become a video tech and fix arcade machines or anything like that. So I was kind of lost in what I was going to do, and then later on it transitioned that I got a bit of a direction then. But at that point in time, I had no idea. So
right. So you've left school. You've said, peace. You flipped on the bird, and you've gone, I'm out of here. You joined the workforce. Being that it was, at the arcade at that point for you, and you've just said, feeling a bit lost, a bit of misdirection, if not any direction back then. Did you dive heavily into the workforce then? Was that sort of the be all end all? Like all that time and energy that you put into schooling was now, all right, I'm going to really try and motivate myself, work even harder at this place to the best that you could, given that it was an arcade. I mean, there's only certain things you can do to make that place bigger and better, if you will. Did you dive headfirst into the workplace, or was that just some income and you were starting to look for other avenues?
Yeah, look, I was happy there. I had a lot of friends there. You'd get a lot of kids that come in there, especially during the summer holidays. That was the place to be at Glenelg. Everyone was on the water slides and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So I was content with what I was doing. I enjoyed the video game process of playing games. Street Fighter and Double Dragon back then were the big things, and to me, I was playing them every day, so I had no complaints. But again, I still didn't know where I was going to go, and the funny thing came up where in the city there's a building called the Myers Centre. It's a big, massive shopping building in the main shopping mall, and a Canadian company came over and they opened a big entertainment place up in the top 2 floors of it called Dazzleland, and it had a roller coaster in the roof and this.
Oh, awesome.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Had an arcade in there. So, of course, being you, and I want to go work there. So I ended up getting the job working in the arcade in that amusement centre in the city. So it was really just me doing the same thing over and over again, still not knowing where I was going to do, what I was going to do, where I was going to be. I still had no idea. It was when I actually joined the gym is when I started to get a bit of direction and focus, then more so than any other time before then. So
was the arcade, to transition to the new arcade and learning and about and wanting to join up and start in the gym, was that at all motivated by your love of wrestling? Was that still a thing for you at this point, or had that dropped off out of high school? Because there's a lot of guys that will say, after high school, I kind of lost track of it, did my own thing, but then it was on TV at a friend's house in the background. You go, oh yeah, I remember watching this as a kid. What are they doing now? And having that rehooked, having the teeth sunk back in and going, man, I don't know why I ever stopped watching that. Was wrestling a motivator for you going to the gym, or you're just like, I just want to try the gym and work out and see what happens?
Wrestling was always in my mindset, but not my focus when I got to that age. Because I was doing martial arts and so on, that was probably a big focus of mine at that time.
Right.
And I competed in my first full contact tournament to my mum's complete and utter whereas I actually got 2 broken ribs out of it and put in hospital.
Oh. How old were you here? Was this not long after leaving grade 11? Was this the same year, or was this?
Oh, I would have been 15, 16, around there.
All right. So just before, kind of.
Yeah. So I competed in the tournament, obviously got hurt, had to take some time off, and I said to my mum and my dad at that point, I said, I'm never going to let anyone ever hurt me ever again.
Wow. Okay.
And I was lucky. I weighed about 60, 70 kilos ringing wet. I wasn't real big. I was tall, lanky, but skinny. So that was my drive to get in the gym. Always been a massive fan of Arnold, Stallone, anyone that had a massive, strong physique that could present well, even the wrestlers, the Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, everyone at that time, Hercules, Rick Rude. They were people that I would look up to and inspire. So, but when I started training in the gym, it wasn't a pure focus for wrestling, because I started to put a lot of size on and get in really good shape. So at what age was I? I think I was 19. I competed in my first bodybuilding contest in Junior Mr. South Australia, and I won. And I'm like, I don't know how I did it. I didn't know how to do the diet properly. I didn't know how to tan properly. I didn't know how to do nothing, but I managed to get in good enough shape to be able to win the contest. And then I sort of got bit by the bug. So there was another contest 6 months later. No one in their right mind does one bodybuilding contest. goes and competes 6 months again later because you just can't put your body through that torture.
Yeah.
But me being me, having no clue whatsoever, decided, I'm going to go ahead and compete again.
Mm-hmm.
So within that interim, I'd managed to go to the US for a holiday. As part of a birthday present from my parents, in fact. And because I was into the bodybuilding scene and so on, I went on a specific bodybuilding tour. We went and saw the Ironman International in Los Angeles. We went to Columbus, Ohio for the World Gym Expo. I got to meet Arnold there and had a photo with him and so on. We stayed in the same hotel as Arnold. So that was a really big, massive motivator for me. So when I come back, I had 9 weeks to get ready for this bodybuilding contest again. And this time I had every clue on what to do. I knew everything. I knew every trick under the book because I got it all from all the Americans and everything. I even went and dyed my hair pure white and cut it into a flat top because one of the pros had done that to his hair because it accentuated his tan more, and he wore these very special blue pair of trunks which just looked incredible on stage. So I copied exactly what he did. Mm-hmm. Went out on stage. I think I was probably 10 kilos heavier than what I competed at before and won again.
Wow.
So, Junior Mr. SA back-to-back 2 years in a row.
Man, that's to put it bluntly, that's a long way from the arcade.
Yeah.
So you're in the gym, you're motivated by all the action stars of the 80s and all the wrestlers and things like that. Do you remember taking that first trip? Because that's a long flight, first and foremost. So you land, you go and do these experiences. Do you meet Arnold at the expo?
Yes.
You meet Arnold for the first time. What was that moment like? Because they always say don't meet your heroes, but going from having, the idolization, starting the gym, going, yeah, these guys are, incredible physical specimens during that peak era, to now going to meet the guy. Was it at all a bit sort of weird? Did it feel like a poster had come to life? Like, did you understand like the magnitude of what that moment was like for you as a kid?
Yeah, look, it was pretty amazing because, I was still quite a big guy at that stage, obviously, because I'd gone from one bodybuilding contest and getting ready to prep for another.
Yeah.
So when I got to meet Arnold, he was quite impressed at my size and my shape already. And then when he found out I was an Australian, he was even more impressed with that. And he had a quick little moment to have a chat with me and everything. We had a photo together, which was great. So my actual experience with him was amazing. It's something I'll never forget. And it was something that probably gave me that push to work harder when I got back for the competition to make sure that I was going to win again. So.
Right. So now where are we timeline-wise? Are we in the early 90s now?
Yeah, we'd be around 95, I'd say. I'd probably be, after that contest, I was still prepping for different contests and bodybuilding and so on. But this is when I met two guys in the gym when I was training. And they said, what do you do? So I work in a video arcade. And they laughed.
Oh, so you're still at the arcade? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and they said, somebody that looks like you and you're working in a video arcade? And I said, well, I don't have any trouble in there. And they laughed again. I said, well, what do you clowns do? They said, oh, we're bouncers. Said,
right.
What's a bouncer? They said, how old are you? I told them my age. And they said, look, we work in nightclubs, stopping fights. Wow, shit. And they said, have you ever been to a nightclub before? And I said, no. I went, oh, okay. And they said, well, we think you should go and get your security license because we can get you working with us. Mm. Oh, shit. All right. That might, like, I'm single, no girlfriend, no nothing. So back then, the process to get your security license was you go into this office in the city, get a form, fill it out, tick the boxes, pay the money, submit it. They look at it, they approve it, they take a passport photo of you, they laminate your card, there you go.
Wow, it's all done on the day.
All done on the day. There's no training, there's no police checks, there's no first aid required, there's no nothing. It's any Tom, Dick and Harry can get this license straight away. So I got mine. And then the next time I seen the lads at the gym, I said, yeah, I've got it, here you go. So to speed the story up, they took me to meet this guy, did some paperwork with them. And then I remember my first night, I was thrown into this massive nightclub in Adelaide called Heaven. It's a very notorious nightclub, and a lot of stuff has happened there with all different sorts of things. But I'm put in a main room where there's 1,100 people. Jeez. I'm a young lad standing there that's worked in a video arcade, surrounded by 1,100 people that are drunk, off their face, older than me. There's music blaring that I can hardly hear myself talk. There's lots of alcohol around. It's hot. And it was a baptism of fire for me to get into that industry that way. And then within 10 minutes of working there's a massive brawl on the dance floor that we all have to just pile in on and try to sort out.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty intense, but I would prefer it to be that way than to be eased in and trickled in to the industry the way that they somewhat do it now. It was exciting, and, my life then was all about that work. Mm-hmm. And then certainly I'm still doing it to this day. Not so much the bouncing itself, but as we'll get into, a lot of other different aspects of the security industry.
Right. So when the opportunity came to do security work, did you say to the arcade, "Hey, look, I'm done," or was it very much, "I'll keep the arcade and see how this goes"?
Yeah, look, I still worked in the arcade. It was only Monday to Friday.
Right.
And then I'd do Friday night and Saturday night in the clubs, mm-hmm. and try to recover on Sunday and go work on Monday with these incredible stories to these other people that were working at the amusement centre going, "Oh my God, you'll never guess what I saw, and you never guessed what I heard, you never guessed what I did." And they're just lapping up every minute of every bit of story that I would tell them. So,
now being of that, the child of that era, coming up now in the early 90s, you had said yourself, you were a single guy, didn't have the girlfriend, but you kind of felt a bit isolate during high school. Was that at all a big sort of shock to the system being put? Because you probably maybe collectively on a busy day you could get maybe say 1,100 people through in and out of that arcade in a maybe busy day, busy week.
Mm.
Was that a shock to your system, getting quite literally dropped into a room full of that many people, knowing that you had sort of that introverted kind of lifestyle at that point? Was it just like, okay, what happens now? Were you shook up? Or did you go, man, I've got to put my game face on. I've got to try and do this job. And there's so many people. Like, how was that experience for you? It
was pretty intense. It was a bit of both, really, because back then too, they never used a two-way radio when you were doing security in a nightclub. You'd have a pager on your belt.
Right, yeah, because you could hear that over the sound of 1,100 people.
It would vibrate, so you'd have to try and feel out for it. And what would happen, you'd read the pager and it would give you a code, but you had to know what code that was to what bar that was pertaining to. Mm. You had to learn all this. So I had no clue on what the codes meant at all. What I would do is I'd grab the pager, see it go off, and then I'd look over at where the other guards were, and whatever way they ran, I ran with them. It's the easiest way I could do it.
Right.
But, it was pretty intense, to not really have much experience in physically fighting anyone, and especially street fighting, because that's what it was. I had the martial arts part, but the street fighting, of being aware of watching out for a bar stool, a pool cue, or a bottle and stuff like that, I was as green could be.
Yep.
So I got clocked and hit a few times and a few things like that. But you know what? You learn pretty quick, and if it hurts once, it's not going to hurt again because you don't let it hit you again.
Yeah, I mean, blunt but straight to the point. I mean, pretty sound advice, especially in that environment at that time. Was this, to the best of your ability, do you remember this being sort of, I guess, the next big post-fight thing for you? I mean, it's not an official contest. It's not, you're not being graded, and you're definitely not getting, well, you may have done, but you definitely weren't 16 getting hit in the ribs, I should say, at that point. Would you say this would be the sort of next big fight-esque thing that you had to do? And it wasn't so much fighting as it was just defensive and, defending yourself and handling people that have already fought with others, if not yourself, for whatever substance they were on. Would this be about the next big fight sort of related thing that you did since that time? Absolutely,
because you had no idea on what was going to be around the corner, what was going to happen the next night. We had fights with rugby teams, football teams,
great,
outlaw motorcycle clubs, gangs, all this sort. There was, back then, all that element was around, and they had power back then. Not so much to this nowadays. It's a lot of that's been disbanded, but it was pretty scary back then. And you might grab somebody and throw them out, but then the next day they're back with about 6 or 7 different guys that you think, oh shit, I'm in trouble here. So that element of shock was always there. I'd had Corona bottles smashed over my head. I had staples and stitches in the back of my head. I'd worked with one of the gashes open in the back of my head until my shift had finished. Blood bleeding everywhere. But that was what I was like. I was like, I'm not going home. I'm not going to let that little bastard that hit me over the head with the bottle win. I'm going to finish, and then I'll go. And that's what I used to do. So that sort of, I was stubborn like that anyway prior to getting into that work, but then that hardened me up even more was the fact that I was not willing to give up or cower away. Like if there was a fight that was happening and I'd jump in, if they turned around and fronted up on me, I wouldn't cower away or run or what. I'd stand there and go, all right, let's go. You know, whatever happens, happens. Either I'm going to get hit and knocked down or you're going to get the same. It's up to you. So, yeah.
Yeah. Looking back on hindsight, that little guy that threw the bottle, I apologize. And here's the bar owner now comes into frame.
Here's the smash bottle.
I have the blood of the maniac. So it is very much a ruthless environment back then, being that, as you said, it's not as regulated and there isn't a lot of power to those kinds of individuals anymore. So it very much was a sink or swim. Was there any point, and surely there must have been on the first kind of trial, maybe the first day, but if not the first week, where you went, oh man, what have I signed up for? Or was it this thrill of going in each night going, what is tonight going to be?
No, I think it was more the thrill. I loved my first night that I was there. The adrenaline rush that you would have was just something that I craved, that I wanted, because certainly working in an arcade, there's no adrenaline at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Apart from kick someone's ass with Street Fighter or something, but yeah.
Yeah, the claw machine would have been the only adrenaline thing back then.
Yeah, when you win something. Whew. But no, the nightclub scene for me was good because I'd never really gone out and was in that scene anyway. For me, I'm now in that scene. I'm now getting paid while I'm there. I'm not wasting my money on booze. I never really drank, so I mean that wasn't something that I was missing out on. Mm-hmm. Being surrounded by people that were friends of mine, girls, having the attention from people because now you're the security in the club. You're the man. You're the one that dictates who stays and who goes.
Sure, yeah.
It was a whole new world for me. But it was something that, I sort of took to like a fish to water and loved it ever since. So,
were you prepared for the amount of attention? Did it feel like almost like a longer weighted compliment, or did it take them adjusting to get that sort of the good attention, I should say, not the club chaos?
Yeah, no, look, when you start to do bodybuilding and so on, you grow this narcissistic bone, this extra bone in your body that wants that attention. So having done the contest and bouncing, being big at that age, I'd had the blonde flat top, it was back then, Rocky 3 had come out and Drago was in there and that was my nickname. That's what they used to call me. So
right. Okay.
It was a bit of a, ego boost for me, which was good. Also too, back then, I think every guy that worked security in the nightclub had a flat top, had blonde hair and was tanned up anyway. So whenever anyone got hurt, they come back with the police. We never used to wear a badge with a number. We didn't have to back then.
Right.
So go, okay, which one was it? And they'd go, the big guy with the flat top with the blonde hair. They go, all right, and they'd come in and we're all the same. And they go, they'd come up to you and go, was it you? No, it wasn't me. They go, was it you? No, it wasn't me either. No, we have no idea what you're talking about. And then they'd walk out and we'd all be giggling away like schoolgirls. Like, it was pretty funny back then.
Do you remember a standout story from back during your time? Hey, back during your time in heaven.
Yeah. Look, there was a pretty big fight up at Bar 1, which was the section where I used to always be. And this gentleman was a high-profile football player, let's see, at the time. And he got introduced to the electrical box in the car park out the back. And then he said something smart to me, so I picked him up and I threw him in the dumpster and shut the lid. I got in trouble for that.
And he's still there today.
Yeah. I didn't realise that the hotel owner was one of the sponsors of the football club. So I got raked over the coals for that one.
Oh, man. How bad? Were you sent home?
I thought that I was going to lose my job.
Yep.
So, but then I had another incident with the same guy only a few weeks later, which actually redeemed myself. He still got treated the same way by me. He used to do this trick where he'd go and go up to the bar and he'd order a drink. And then he'd order 2 drinks. And then when the bar lady would just start to punch the price into the till, he'd go, oh, can I have one more? I'm like, yeah, no worries. So as she'd walk off to go get the other drink, he'd grab the 2 drinks and walk off and not pay for it. And then you'd try and find him, and then the glassy would come up and he'd be wiping the tables down, and he'd lift the glasses up to wipe the tables down. And this arrogant pig would grab the rag and he'd throw it into the face of the glassy and tell him to piss off. So that night, did that as I was coming up to him to talk to him about the drinks, and I managed to, how do I put it, persuade him to leave again the same way that I did before. And this time I didn't get in trouble for it.
No bins this time.
No bin, but I think the electrical box was still in the same spot. So maybe, yeah.
Hey, man, we'll let people's imagination carry that story into the wind.
Yeah, well, that's probably my first introduction to a real street fight hardcore match, I guess, now looking back at it in a funny way.
Wrestling returns and rears its ugly head once more. Was the club, like we said at the top of the podcast, the intimidating presence now of being a bodybuilder, and you're still a big dude today, but also heavily tattooed. Was the bodyguarding security work, I should say, around that time the initial start of tattooing, or did that was still having that tan and that flat top and that sort of chiseled Greek physique, was that priority one? Like, with tattoos a thing for you back then?
No, look, I didn't get my tattoos till I was 38.
Right. Okay, so way down the track.
Yeah, because obviously my mum never liked them. She said, if you ever get a tattoo, I'm going to kill you. And I believed it. So I had the utmost love and respect for my mum. She's gone now. She's up in heaven. But I waited. I literally waited until I was 38. And the only reason why I got my first tattoo was it was my name of my first son was tattooed on my forearm. And I said to her, Mum, I have to. And she kind of understood. She was expecting just his name on my forearm, but that turned into his name and then a whole bunch of flames right up my elbow and then a skull. And so it kind of manifested after that, and then it just went from there. So I had pretty much all of my tattoos were done within 8 months, and that includes my chest, my back, both my sleeves, and my calf as well.
And it was a tattoo bug, as they call it. As soon as you got your first one, just had to keep it going.
Oh, it's legit. It is. It's the sound of the gun, the scratching. It's like a cat scratching you with a claw.
Yeah.
That's the feeling of it, but it's, over and over and over again. So once you start, you just literally can't stop. It becomes an obsession. So,
man, when I got my first tattoo across my shoulders, it was this Latin font. And, similar experience, but obviously I don't have the size and the frame of the Maniac. So let's just say a little bit more of an intense process for yours truly. But when I was getting the outline done, because obviously you got to get the outlines of the word and you got to color it in. And getting the outline done, man, I'll share it with you now. I have never stared so intently at a section of floor tiles in my life. I sweat on the best of days. Hey, us wrestlers, man. There'll be times we'd be sitting in a chair. Why is your back sweating? Oh, just please continue. It was just one of those things, and had the aircon blasting on me, trying to cool me down. Not a lot of canvas to work with anyway, but hey, they're doing the best that they could. And it was a Latin phrase, and it was from, most famously, it was used in the Tom Jane 2003 Punisher movie that stars John Travolta. Mm-hmm. And when I got it done, it's Latin for, it says "Civis pacem parabellum," which means if you want peace, prepare for war. And I got that because my parents shared a similar ideology, which was no tattoos, just don't do it. And I thought, okay. So at 19, I got a tattoo, and I'm like, no, maybe it was 22. It was 22, and I got it done, and I'll never forget. You always see those horror stories of tattoos, and especially font, and especially with, strange words,
yep.
Of getting it typoed and done wrong. So yeah, I stare intently at the tiles. The guy does the outline. It felt like a hot nail, just consistently, buzzing and being pressed. But hey, man, there's something about getting your first one, get it done. I remember standing up and thinking, "Well, yeah, that was great. Thanks a lot, man." Because I was like, anything to get me out of that chair. Come on, man, we've been here for hours. And he went, "No, we have to color it in now." Damn it.
Yeah.
And there was a comma in between the two sentences, and that comma sits right on my spine. And man, when I was getting that comma done, when that outline was going, man, and he's like, "Oh, you need to stop shaking." And I'm like, "I'm not." It was quite literally vibrating my entire skeleton. But hey, I get the tattoo and I get home in the mirror, and I'll never forget this. I had one of those moments where I was like, if like, say if you knock a tooth out, and you think, that really hurt my mouth, and you put your finger in your mouth to check, and it's not there, and you have that sort of, wait, wait, that checking that sort of fear, like, no, it must be me, it must be me. And it was like that. I'm looking in the mirror, I'm looking across my shoulder. Yeah, I got my tattoo. Wait a minute. What? Why does that word say param instead of packum?
Oh, no.
And I went, no. I'm like, oh, it must just be me. It must just be me. And I never felt so more uncomfortable in my own skin than I did having that moment. I get to training, because this was, I think, was about 3-4 years in at this point, and I'm at training, and I had put it up on MySpace and social media and stuff like that.
MySpace, wow.
Yeah, back in the day, man, MySpace, and so I put it up there. My trainer go down the training, and he says, "Show us your tattoo." And I showed him, and he says, I used to study Latin in high school. And I went, oh, great. So you know straight up what this meant. And he goes, yeah. He goes, but that's the sentence you want and what you have on your back is not the same thing. And I went, okay. I said, why? And he goes, well, if you want peace, prepare for war, right? And I said, yeah, it's to do with my medical background. Like I had extensive medical background as a kid. I felt that was my war. And now I'm healthy and clean. I'm at peace. And he said, yeah. He said, if you want peace, prepare for war, so pacum parabellum. And he said, right now you have parum parabellum, which right now translates to if you want parent, prepare for war.
Oh, no.
And I went, what? And he's like, yeah, so guess you're going to be a dad. And I'm like, no, it's not what I want. That's not what Anyway, we managed to, it was one of those sort of Latin R's that you can, sort of add the bottom loop of the R to make it kind of look like a hybrid C.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I had one of those horror moments, but it is an addictive feeling. And I got my second one, I think many moons later. But yeah, man, there is no other sensation in the world like getting your first tattoo and then getting it done to the extent you had. Pop quiz, which was the most painful one for you?
When I had the word Maniac tattooed across my chest, and because my pectoral muscles are reasonably sizable, let's say, yep. When you get to my sternum, there's nothing there but the sternum. And 2 points in the artwork where this design joins is smack bang in the middle of my sternum. And when he was getting it done, he started off and he did one half, one half. And it was killing me as it was then. And then I thought, okay, we're going over to the second half now. That's all right. He's going to finish with that and that'll be fine. All of a sudden he goes back to the first half that he's done, and it's like cutting through raw meat. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I just need to touch up a few things. I'm like, oh my God, I'm about ready to get done for homicide because I'm going to kill this guy that's doing my tattoo. Yeah. And then he finishes and goes back over. But then every now and then he'd see something and he'd go back again to the first side. I'm like, I'm going to fucking kill you if you go. It was just, pardon my language. But yeah, that was pretty painful, that one. And I mean, that's sizable too. It's not a small little fondle. It's like takes up half of my chest on both sides. So
yeah. So that tattoo is about roughly the size of me. And, and was that the last tattoo that you got?
No, Jesus, it continued from there. I mean, then I had another son, so his name came on. The boys' birth dates came on. Then I had the design up my arm. Then from there, my back was done. I put my wrestling logo smack in the middle of my back with a whole lot of stuff stemming out. And look, trust me, probably the biggest body part of my body is my lat muscles on my back. I used to get called the barn door, basically. So to fill that back took a lot of work. And then I decided to get something on the back of my calf. And then later on, I had my chest capped as well, completely, and my hand done. And, so it's ongoing.
Right. So what was the last one, like your most recent one?
Oh, on my hand, I had the word king on my left hand with a crown.
Right. Is there a matching word on the right hand?
Not at the moment. No. I want to get something similar to, I was listening to Batista the other day, and he has on his wrist, on one wrist it says passive by nature, and on the other one it says violent by choice. Now, I think that's exceptional, but I don't want to copy what he's got. I'd like to get something similar, so.
Yeah, passive by choice.
Yeah, that's it.
Hey, man, you're in the line of security. Yeah. It's your choice of whether you want to be nice to them or not, right?
Exactly.
All right, so let's cut to the meat of the extensiveness known as the Maniac here, because we bring it up with the tattoo, and we've talked about it roughly being influenced by it as a kid, having that sort of in the background and being one of the forefront figures when you start your bodybuilding journey of the wrestlers back then in the 80s. During the club days, are you starting to look at wrestling as something that you could do now that the frame and now that your physique was improving and chiseling, if you were over time? Were you looking at wrestling as a possibility, or was it like a similar thing with the security guards coming up saying, "Hey man, what are you doing?" "Oh, I work security. You should come and wrestle."
Yeah, look, I didn't know that wrestling existed here in Australia, to be honest, back then. I was still watching it on TV, I was seeing Stone Cold and The Rock and everyone and all that sort of stuff, especially in the Attitude Era was amazing. I loved it, but it still didn't click in my head that perhaps I could get in there and I could do that. It just didn't for some reason. I don't know why. And then if we fast forward a little bit, I ended up doing security for a local wrestling show in Adelaide. They approached my company and asked if we could do the security for it. Mm-hmm. And I got to talk to the promoter, the guy that was running it, who was a wrestler as well. And he found out that I was a fan of wrestling. So he said, "Oh, this might be a good mix for your company and us to be together and do business." It's great. Right. No problem. I was like 3 times bigger than this guy who was the wrestler promoter anyway. So yeah. Back then I shaved my head, but I had short hair and I bleached it blonde, pretty much like Tito Ortiz, because I was a UFC fan as well. Yeah. So long story short, we go to do security at one of their shows, and I figured I'm going to take the best spot and stand right near the runway so that I can see down there, I can see the ring, I can see the action, and not really have to do much work. That's the way that I looked at it.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there and the crowd starts to spill in and all that sort of stuff. And next minute, these kids come up to me and they start looking at me. And one kid pulls out a flip phone, because this is how far back we were. He takes the phone out and takes a photo of me. I said, "What are you doing?" "You're one of the wrestlers, aren't you?" I said, "Can you see what it says on my shirt?" "Security." "No, I'm not." I said, "Yeah, you are." I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Trust me." And the kids are like, "Whatever." And then, the crowd's coming in again and so on, and they keep looking over because, mind you, I'm about 6'3", 6'4", 6'6" in my wrestling boots, weighing 130 plus kilos. Yep. Clean skin, still no tattoos, but with this bleached blonde short hair. So I guess I had the in the wrestling game, what they call the look. Mm-hmm. That's what was attracting the people to me then and there. So the show went on. Everything was fine. At the end of the show, I'd gather my guys together. I'd go up to the promoter and say, "How was that? Are you happy with everything?" He said, "Yeah, no trouble, no issue. Everything was great." And I said, "Great, excellent." He goes, "There was one thing, though, I need to mention." I said, "Okay, what was that?" I said, "Was there an issue?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, sort of." And I said, "Right, okay." I said, "What was it? Tell me, I'll fix it. And if it was one of my guys, he won't be back next time." He goes, "It was you." I said, "Okay." I was kind of taken back because I take my security work seriously.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, what was the problem?" And he goes, "Well, to be honest," he goes, "no one was looking at the ring the whole night." I said, "Right." He said, "They're all looking at you."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I didn't do anything. I just stood there and made sure everything was all good." He said, "Yeah, but everyone's focus was on you." He said, "No one gave a shit about my wrestlers in the ring, nothing at all." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Look, that's a shame because I really enjoyed watching the show and so on." I said, "But look, I can fix that." I said, "I just won't come anymore. I'll get my other guys to do it and that'll solve the problem." I said, "Maybe I'll buy a ticket and come and watch the show because I did really like it."
Yeah.
He goes, you are a wrestling fan now?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I am." And he goes, "Well, look," he goes, "I have an idea." He said, and I said, "Okay, what's that?" He said, "How about we train you up?" I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "You've got the look, which is one of the hardest things to get. We can teach anyone to wrestle. You can wrestle with a mop, but to have the look that you can't make that happen. You just either have it or you don't." So I said, "Yeah, all right, cool, let's do it." And then I went to training. I started to learn the break falls and I'm picking them up real quick. I'm doing the front flip into a break fall. I'm doing them perfectly. Because I'd watched so much wrestling too, I kind of understood the way the moves were done. Not that I'd ever done them before. So I did my first body slam and they've gone, "Where did you learn to do that?" I said, "I've seen it on TV." They said, but how did you know where to put your hand and tuck the head? And how did you? I said, "I just take notice of what they do on the TV and just watch."
Yeah.
Like, wow. Okay. So my training was fast-tracked. I picked it up really quick, which was good. And the way they brought me in was very clever. We had a guy called Mark Aston who was a Channel 10 sports reporter.
Right.
On the news every night. Everyone would see Mark Aston. Mark Aston was a wrestling fan. He got involved with this wrestling company, and this night he was in the ring right at the end of the show to congratulate someone or interview someone. I'm not sure what it was. But then all of a sudden, the heels come running down to the ring and started to kick shit out of the wrestlers, and they started to beat up Mark as well.
Right.
And everyone again's looking around and so on, but they're not kind of looking at me anymore because they've realised I've done several shows where I've done nothing at all. I've just stood there.
Right.
Then, funny enough, I've ripped my shirt off, jumped the rail and just ran straight at the ring. Jumped into the ring and just cleaned house, wiped everyone out. The place went berserk.
Of course, yeah.
Actual footage on YouTube that somebody filmed with their phone, and it is absolute chaos. People are just losing their minds. And that was my introduction into wrestling. And then I still didn't have a wrestling name or a gimmick or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said to me the next day, they said, "How was it? What happened?" And I said, "Look, I ran into the ring like a maniac and wiped everyone out." And I've gone,
that's it.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the name straight away. And it just progressed from there.
So you had touched on it just before, because as much as I want to get into now the career of running down to the ring like a maniac, you touched on it just briefly, and I want to make sure that this gets out there too, because this is also such an important part of your life, not only back then, but to this day. You had mentioned that you had your own company at that point.
Mm.
What was the company that you had started, and where did that idea come from? Was that something that you had thought of during the bouncing days in the club?
What had happened was I was working for a company, and it was called Sundown Protection Services, and it was a friend of mine that owned it. And I was more than happy doing what I was doing, but there were a few things there that kind of, I thought, weren't right, or I wasn't happy with. So I thought to myself, I reckon I can open my own security company and give it a shot. So I registered a name, got a logo, got everything that I needed to get prepared to open a security company. And then my friend who owned Sundown got whiffed of it and basically said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm thinking of possibly doing it myself. I'd like to give it a shot. I reckon I can do it." And he goes, "I reckon you can do it too." I said, "Okay." He said, "But starting off with a new name and no contracts, no nothing," he says, "it's going to be extremely hard." He said, "What if I sell you half a Sundown and you can take those clients and put them into your company?"
Mm.
"Really? Would you do that?" And he goes, "Yeah, if you want." He said, "I'm pretty much at the time where I've had enough, so yeah, I'm happy to do it." Then it spiraled into basically buying his entire company from him.
Wow. Okay. Do you remember how long that time frame was, where you were offered a part of it, and then, hey, I'll just take the whole thing?
Weeks.
Really?
Weeks.
Was it that because you were just so gung-ho and it sort of felt like you had finally connected the dots and this is something that you were really passionate about, and he said, "Hey, look, you're way more into this than I am, you just take it"? Or was there some sort of deal in place?
No, I think he could see how passionate I was about it and the ideas that I had and I wanted to do. And I think it was the right time for him to get out too. He had issues where he had to kind of step away or whatever. So it kind of was the right time for him and the right place for me. So we did the deal. I kept the name of the company. It had a decent reputation, but not the best. So then I came in and changed everything, brought customer service into the deal, because I'd done a stint at Westfield Marion in the shopping centre there doing security for them for about 7 years. And they were very customer service orientated and so on. So when I took that and brought that into the, let's call it the bouncing scenario, it was unheard of, touching base with your clients every week, making sure they're okay, having a 24-hour mobile number that they could ring somebody if the guard never showed up. They had a port of call immediately to raise a concern, whereas before they never had it. If they never showed up one night, well, then they were like, "Oh, well, we'll have to wait till tomorrow, give the office a call tomorrow and find out what happened." This, they've got immediate contact with me and I can resolve it straight away and get another guard there if the guard didn't show up. So I brought all these different things into the industry that no one was doing, and that's what made my company explode and, become one of the biggest privately owned firms in South Australia.
And it's still running to this day?
Well, no, I have a different company now. That company we closed down due to other issues, a divorce. So then I have a new company now called Shadow Security Group, which is very much exceeding the same direction as what Sundown was. But obviously we have more to do with the personal protection side of things now as well.
Right. So when that first sort of conversation came through during the bouncing days and the topic was brought up, do you remember sort of doing that first initial role, like getting that first official job and said, hey, man, this is day one. This is what we do. This is what we'd like you to try and do. Was that a huge change given from the arcade to the clubs to now protecting people? Was there a huge difference, or was it very easy to adjust and sort of chop and change to apply to this new field?
It was kind of a new thing to me. Like, I didn't have any business acumen. I'd never studied it at school or anything like that, but I knew the industry and I knew what was lacking. So bringing these ideas forward and implementing them, I think, was like a fresh breath of fresh air in the industry, that people are going, holy shit, where's this guy come from? Because we've never heard of him doing this, this and this. And the personal protection side of things, that was something that would grow on its own. Really, that's another story within itself, where it was me meeting a certain person that made that increase quite a lot, in fact. So from the company side of it, it was just a fresh set of eyes and a fresh mind with bigger and better ideas, because this guy was on autopilot. He had all the clubs, he had the this and that, and he was making money and he didn't really care. He was at that point where he wanted to get out, whereas I wanted to stamp my authority in the industry itself and be someone. So that's what I did, basically. I pushed it as hard as I could.
Right. Now, was that the first time that you had done any sort of security-based protection kind of work, or did you have any experiences earlier on?
No, I had a couple of experiences earlier on, especially when I was at Heaven. We'd have celebrities come in, DJs, all that sort of stuff that need to be looked after. Okay. And they would put them with me.
Right.
I don't know why they would put them with me. I was one of the bigger guys there, I'm clean cut, no facial hair or nothing, no tattoos. So, it was to use a better term, a good looking kid back. So, yeah. And I mean, look, I looked after like Sophie Monk, quite a few, Carl Cox, Lisa Lash, there was all these sorts of people that were coming through. And then I got my first job where I was looking after Elle Macpherson when she was doing her lingerie launch in Myers.
Man, that's quite a start. I'm sure that you were very happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, look, let's say I certainly wasn't contemplating turning the job down, that's for sure.
Let's just say maybe in the grand scheme of things, that could have quite questionably been the hardest job for you to do at that point. Must stay focused. Yeah,
pretty much. Surrounded by lingerie and stuff, and then there's Elle there, and you're just like...
I am a professional.
And I was only very young too, so you can just imagine it, can't you?
Hey man, good-looking kid, lingerie Elle Macpherson. Concoction for all good and wonderful, and maybe sometimes some bad things to happen. But hey, you get through it, you get the praise, and the job continues. So you have the company now, you're developing a bit of a streak. That's where the opportunity to guard a wrestling show comes about. As an avid fan, would you say, although, meeting and mixing with these celebrities, obviously you've got to keep your cool. You can't sort of stop and ask for an autograph. Or maybe you can, I don't know. Can you?
No.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, hey, just want to ask that question. Sure, a lot of people out there are thinking the same thing, maybe behind closed doors. Oh, here's a unit, sir, and just handkerchief. So no, okay. So you got to be professional, got to be on the ball at all times. When that call would come in to do that wrestling show, were you like, as you were explaining before, you stood up by the ringside, you're watching the crowd thought you were one of the guys. Much like the Elle Macpherson, was it hard to sort of almost keep that focus, keep that attention, because you had been such a fan of it? Were you sort of watching the action and going, oh, I've got to watch the crowd. Oh, but action, got to watch the crowd. Were you just as much as a fan as you were a professional on that day?
Definitely still a fan, but also professional. I mean, I was strategic. I placed myself in a spot where my back was against the stage and I had to face the ring. Mm-hmm. And then I could watch the entire crowd as well. But in my eye shot, the ring is there as well. So I'm not having to turn away from where I'm working to look at the ring. I was very smart in my positioning or where I put myself. For that fact, I wanted to make sure. So yeah, I wasn't silly, let's say.
He's covering it from all angles on day one. Right. So you have your training. Do you remember how long it was for you at that stage? Because you're picking it up quick. You've been exposed to the business. You're in peak physical condition. You've already had the the rough and tumbles of the life, you know, prior, during, and after those clubbing and mixed martial arts days. Now you get into the wrestling world. First question I got for you about the wrestling thing. Do you remember your first bump? And did it sort of take the wind out of your sails, that first initial fall?
I remember my first bump, absolutely, a break fall in the middle of the ring. The only thing it didn't take the wind out of my sails, but my hands hurt.
Yeah, I got to hit that mat. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because my size and how big I was, my back was big, my traps were big, my shoulders were big. Mm-hmm. Basically, it was just a normal hit to the ground. But it was the first time doing it was having the guts to be able to make yourself do it. Because you don't know how much flex is in the ring. You don't know how soft or how hard it is. You know, naturally, to do a break fall on a concrete floor is completely unnatural.
Right.
You wouldn't do it. Mm. So in the ring, everyone's going, do it, do it, do it. So it was a case of just basically, you know, going, fuck it, and doing it to then realising that, hey, that's not that bad. And, of course, also, too, having the sense of mind of tucking your chin when you do it, which I did from the get-go, because obviously, as you know, you let your head hit the mat, well, then, yeah.
Yeah, it's, you'll be flashing back to putting people in a bin, that's for sure, waking up in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
So you have that first initial bump, you have your training. Are you hooked immediately? Like, are you like, man, this is everything I thought it would be and more?
Yeah, pretty much, because I was picking it up pretty quick. You know, I was even one of these guys that could swing a punch that would look real, know how to do the stomp properly that makes it sound a massive hit, miss somebody by millimeters.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how I knew how to do it. It just happened. I wasn't trained to do it. They were big haymakers, big roundhouses, so they looked amazing. That's not how I fought when I was bouncing or doing martial arts or anything, but I knew that it was the pageantry of the show, and everything had to look big, from the way you looked or the way you threw a kick or the way you threw a punch or even a headbutt, from bringing your head all the way back and then bringing it forward for the headbutt. You know, in normal fashion terms, if you're going to headbutt someone, it's a very short, brief snap of your neck straight onto their nose. Mm. But you make everything bigger and elongated. So it's really weird. It kind of was natural for me. I don't really know why or how to explain it. It happened. It was weird.
Yeah, no, I completely resonate, and I understand completely what you mean. Sometimes there's just that drive or that spark or that click or that moment where it's never one you can pinpoint, but as soon as you get it, you get it. And when you get it, you never lose it. And some guys, it takes a while, you know, and everyone's different. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of guys you've either worked with or seen train or even were training at the same time where it was, man, hopefully this one day this guy's going to get it. And then when they do, man, let's go 0 to 100, just like that. For a guy like yourself, yeah, there are things there. Like I said, I completely agree. There are moments where you go, I don't know how I'm doing this. I don't know why this is happening, but I get it. And did you have that sense of when you were training and things like that? A lot of times when the guys train, you know, everyone comes from different walks of life. Everyone has different backgrounds, and much like yourself, going into that wrestling world, everyone sort of comes together. It feels sort of like almost like a circus, like a big top family. You got your comedians, you got your strongmen, you got your women, you got your acrobats, you got your clowns, everything in between. Were you nervous to perform or train with other people, or given that you had the bodyguarding and security work both in the clubs and in your own business, you were sort of accustomed to doing these sort of strange yet weirdly wonderful actions in front of other people watching?
Yeah, no, look, it was intimidating the first time I had to train and especially bump and do stuff in the ring with these other guys. I mean, look, it is somewhat like a big family and a big circus and so on, but for me, it was a little different. There was resentment from some of the guys there for the fact that the promoter had brought me in. I'm, 3 times bigger than anyone else. I actually looked like a proper wrestler back then, per se. Obviously, the industry's changed now. But to have this giant guy, as in myself, come in who's picking up things straight away, some of the guys didn't like it because they felt that, the attention was going to be taken away from them and be thrown onto me.
Right.
Which, in reality, it happened. That's what happened, because I used to get walking down the street, people would turn and look twice at me when I'd walk past, whether it's they thought I looked like a wrestler or people didn't realise or understand that somebody could be this big or look that way. I was never shy about the way I presented myself when I went out. I never covered up. I'd always wear, if I, had a tight shirt on, I'd wear the tight shirt. I was proud of what I'd achieved and made. But that always happened. Every time I had a girlfriend or I was out with mum or anything like that, they'd always make the comment, did you just see that guy? I'd be like, no, why? They said they just stared at you all the way past when they walked past you, and then they kept staring as we walked past. My mum used to think it was the funniest thing ever. She would laugh her ass off, basically, because she'd see all these people staring and she'd be like, yeah, that's my son.
Awesome.
So there was a bit of resentment in the, let's call it the locker room and the training area and so on, just because, who's this guy? He doesn't know anything. And then I start picking it up and they're like, So, there was a bit of segregation there, and it was a little bit uncomfortable, but you know what? You just got on with the job.
Right. And speaking of getting on with the job, you're doing the progress now. You're running a business. Safe to say, just to fill in the blank here, the arcade's long gone. Yeah, look, funny enough, you should say the arcade's long and gone. The arcade might have been long and gone, but the arcade came to my house. I bought multiple pinball machines and arcade machines and put them inside my gym, which was in my home, which was massive. It would be like an Anytime Fitness. I managed to have one in my house. Let's say that the security company was quite successful, so that's where I was able to do a lot of these things, which was good. But I brought the arcade to me instead of me being in the arcade anymore. The same one or the similar? Yeah, look, I had the 4-player Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade. I had WWF Royal Rumble pinball machine. I had Baywatch pinball machine. I had a standing arcade machine which had, 400 old school video games in it. I had an original stand-up Mortal Kombat machine, plus the big Harley Davidson ride-on simulator game. I had that as well. So, I wasn't shy about making my arcade ridiculous. Was it more like of a nostalgic thing to put in your gym, to sort of look back on while you're training and go, that I remember starting out doing that? Or were you an avid gamer because you had been spent so long in the arcade? Were you a gaming kind of guy? Or was it more for sentimental, like, oh man, look back at how far you've come at that point? Probably a bit of both. I mean, I was never, you'd have PlayStation come out then, you'd have Wii and whatever else. I had them, but I wouldn't sit there for hours playing games, not like my youngest son is madly on Fortnite with his Xbox. As well as my eldest, who's 17, they both play together and so on. But for me, that wasn't it. Me, to play a game was to stand there and smack a pinball with the buttons, or to stand there and play Mortal Kombat and jump up and down and get the shits when, Sub-Zero head off. So it was a bit of both. And I mean, even to this day now, we have an arcade in our home, and Hunter, who's my youngest, will come down and play Street Fighter with me, or he plays the pinball machine or whatnot. So we have another arcade in our house. It's just something I think that'll stay with me forever. So, do you still have the pinball machines, or were they? I've upgraded, funny enough, to something now that's called a virtual pinball machine. Right. It is actually the same cabinet, the same setup and everything as a normal pinball machine, but this pinball machine has 4,000 pinballs in it. And what happens is the playfield, instead of it being all mechanical and all that, is one big massive LED screen. Right. You can go through and select whatever pinball game that you like. The back would change, the screen would change, and it's exactly like playing that machine. It'll never break down. It's amazing. And it's still got the button flippers and all? Everything. Everything is exactly the same, except for it's not a mechanical playing field. It's a screen. Right. So when the screens are off, it's just 2 flippers, 2 bumpers. No flippers or nothing. It's just a black screen. Wow. Are all in the screen, controlled by the game itself. Okay. Now I'm getting you. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm thinking, it's like a backlight thing, but no, this whole thing. Wow. Where'd you find that? That doesn't come up in normal conversation every day. Hey, have you seen this virtual pinball machine? Well, we went and bought this big arcade machine that's got like 5,000 old school games in it from this 8-ball place. Right. And we got that, and then I saw the pinball machine in the back. I said, what's that? And he's brought me over and he said, oh, it's a virtual pinball machine, yada, yada, yada. We just spent $4,000 on this arcade machine, and he's trying to sell me this too. And I'm like, you're not at the moment. So we left, and then we were talking about it. And then all of a sudden one day I've just gone, you know what, that pinball machine would be awesome. And we ended up just going and buying it. So it just completes the arcade with the bar and all that stuff in there. I'm now trying to get there's a
car racing virtual simulator machine, which has got X amount of games in it. I want to get that now.
It's, man. So, all right. So, rewinding time now. You've had your first session. You're starting to enjoy it. Can you remember roughly how long it was from your first session to your first show? Like your first actual match, that run-in notwithstanding, but your first proper. All right, you're on the bill. Here we go.
It's only a couple of months, I think, and it was a squash. It was an open challenge. This guy goes to the ring with his manager, Benny English, and love you, Benny. He's out there saying anyone in the locker room can have a go, blah blah blah. And I remember my music was Spit It Out by Slipknot. That was my first entrance music. It was the most angriest music I could find.
Yeah.
And I had no wrestling gear on. I had some tack pants, which I used for security boots. The only thing I went and bought was a black leather vest, like a biker vest. Mm-hmm. I bought some black gloves. That's all I had. That's what I was. And then this music hits. No one knows what's going on. No one knows who it is. And then I come through the curtain. I just stand there and I point straight at the ring, and the place just went nuts because they kind of remembered me from the running and so on. They're like, "Holy shit! Now he's actually in the show." Mm. And it was just a real quick squash. I think the bloke ran at me, shoulder tackled him, and he just dropped. Picked him up. I think I threw him to the ropes. He took the big boot, and then he took a choke slam, and then that was it. But that was a lead into something bigger because the owner promoter came down to the ring, who was the main heel. And he gets in my face and challenges me to a match. And like, I haven't spoken to the ring, I haven't done anything before. So he gets right in my face and he calls me a pussy or something or other. I just grab him and I chokeslam him in the ring as well. I pick up the mic, I walk over, I stand literally right over the top of him, I bend down and go, "Challenge accepted," and drop the mic on his nuts and walked out. And that was it. That was the lead into my first real big match. So.
Right. And what year was this? Was this still 2004? You start wrestling training in 2004 at this stage?
It was back around there somewhere, yeah, definitely. I mean, I was still only, I think I was about 26, 27, something like that, mid to early 20s, not younger 20s, because I was kind of thinking to myself too, what are you doing? You know, you're 20, whatever I was, you know, you'd think you'd have to start early, but, you know, it is what it is. But it was good fun, so I was happy that I started then earlier on, because God knows if I would have picked it up or I would have been interested in it back then.
Yeah. So were you avidly watching the product as well while you were training? Tuning in?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, I hadn't been fully trained properly, and one of the first biggest moves I did in the ring was a double suplex. A double on two decent-sized men. Yeah. And I had no idea really what I was doing, but I'd researched it. I watched a few matches. I'd seen Andre do it, and I think, shit, all right, okay, that's how it is. And we went out to the ring. They said, "Do you want to practice it?" I went, "No." All right. So the day came. I went to the ring. I've got in there. They've kicked me to try and hook me up like they were going to suplex me, and then I reversed it and hit them with it. Worked perfect. Yeah.
You kept that in the arsenal?
Yeah, I did that. I have done that a few times, yeah.
Man, I guess we should touch on it, because the reason I bring that up was the first time I saw you compete. We were talking just before we hit the record button, but I'm thinking it was at a convention, and I had met who would become one of the figureheads in your stable, which we'll get to later on. I had met Coyote pretty much, I think, a year into my career, and he is by far a BFG. He's a big friendly giant, thinks the world of everyone, has nothing bad ever. I mean, you'd make him cry before he'd say anything bad about someone. And I remember always being in contact with him, and Supernova for me back then, I was involved in wrestling, but I was heavy into the costuming and cosplaying and dressing up and things like that. Yeah, man, I managed to message Josh. He said, "Yeah, I'm down to wrestling, come on in." And I think you and him were teamed up. Yeah, you were. And yeah, you hit that move. So I know firsthand just how much that move looks awesome and feels twice as devastating, man. So yeah, I'm glad you kept it, man, because it works perfect. So all right, you start off there. Now, for those playing the home game, and for those that may not be aware, the Maniac wasn't something that just stayed in South Australia at this stage. You did have an opportunity very, very close to this time frame of being able to travel around and perform, which a lot of the guys these days, I want to say in current times, global pandemic being what it is, but even before that, it's not as universally recognized, or maybe not as easy to a certain extent, travel around and have the opportunities that a guy like you have had. So back then, Australian wrestling was still sort of much like you finding out and doing security for it. It was very, not cult-like, but it was new in the sense of like, there was flyers and maybe some paper, printouts in the newspaper, things like that. Radio was a big thing. Social media definitely wasn't around much at that stage. I think the internet was still brand newish. Yahoo, all that kind of stuff was still coming out. Yeah. Do you remember how long it was between having that first initial match, having that first feud, that big storyline, that big push for you at that stage? Being that you're a built guy, they're going to do what their best that they can, and they want to use you to the best of your ability. Do you remember having that first initial conversation of, hey, do you want to come work a different state somewhere else? And did you feel like, being the confident man that you are, because I know that you're motivated, you're headstrong, you want to go and do things, you want to do it to the best of your ability, always been a professional, but having that first phone call being like, hey, hi, we're from insert town here, you fill in the blank. Do you remember that phone call and roughly how long it was at this stage for you?
Yeah, look, I'd been wrestling for the company in Adelaide for a little bit, and the story with that was I actually had a falling out with the promoter and the people running the show, and they were the only people that I had wrestled for in Adelaide, and I didn't really know that there were other shows around. And I thought, right, okay, well, maybe my wrestling is over because I've had this falling out and can't wrestle anywhere else. And I don't know how it come about, but Mark Williamson, I got in touch with him, or he got in touch with me. I can't remember who did what. It was one of us. Mm-hmm. He was running wrestling shows in Sydney. He had, I think at that time, he was running a show called Nightmare.
Right.
And I said to him, look, this is who I am, this is what I've done, yada, yada, yada. I can't wrestle in South Australia anymore, but I want to keep going. Would you be interested? And he said, absolutely.
Yep.
So I started to travel to Sydney on a regular basis, wrestle over there for Nightmare. Greg from TNT saw me, and I spoke to Greg, so I started to get work with Greg as well. And it kind of steamrolled from there. The word started to get out about, this new guy that was in. Look at him, he's huge. He's not the most technical wrestler, but shit, doesn't matter. He's drawing a crowd. People want to come and see him. So that's how it kind of spread that way, was the fact that I couldn't wrestle in SA anymore due to certain reasons.
Yep.
And I wanted to continue, and Mark was the one that said, yeah, come with me. And he became my manager for quite some time.
So obviously that's a subject of, falling out, having creative differences, things like that. Was it a creative thing, or were you just feeling a bit burnt out? Or were you feeling like maybe, again, if you want to protect the story, that's all well and good, but just for a tip of the iceberg, was it a creative thing? Did you feel like a bit, because like I said before, you're a guy that likes to have a goal and likes to go and work towards it. Was it a creative, or were you feeling a bit stagnant?
It was a bit of a creative and a bit of a personal issue. And I mean, look, it's so long ago now, and I've actually made peace with this guy. I'm not going to throw him under the bus.
Sure.
Because I still have a lot of respect for him, and thank him for him being the one that brought me in. But back then, there was a deep-rooted personal issue and maybe a little bit of creative as well. But I mean, what did I know about creative back then? I didn't know nothing. I was that new. I had no idea. So yeah, it was just something that happened back then that, it was like two heads playing together, and I wasn't going to give up, nor was he. So that's where it was. So I basically went, fine. And I thought, well, Australia's a big place. Surely there's got to be more around here somewhere. And then when I started to get out there, that's when it went from there. I ended up wrestling in Queensland, Western Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, plus Adelaide again. Never Northern Territory or Canberra, but not really fussed about that.
Yeah, we bring up an interesting topic here, man, because creative is something that I guess a lot of wrestlers always butt heads with. And there's always the four famous words in wrestling is, I have an idea. Yep. And that's always a Pandora's box or a looming can of worms. And so the Maniac character, you had gone from the blonde flat top and having the physique of emulating that of the guys from the 80s. When did it shift and change to the persona that we all know now? And I'm sure people out there would Googling the Maniac would come up and see this image now. Obviously, it's a big. Was it a change over time, or did you see something and thought, "Hey, I want to try and recreate this"?
Look, obviously that first night when I ran to the ring, I had somewhat of a goatee. It wasn't a full goatee. I didn't have any hair on my top lip, but I had it on my chin, and I had some hair. It wasn't real long or anything, but that's what it was. And it was my idea to try and create a character that would fit the name Maniac. I mean, when you think of a maniac, what do you think of? You think of someone that's, crazy, that's going to kill you, that's going to bash you, that's evil, that's whatever. So it was just something that I was thinking about in my own head, and I thought, right, I'm going to shave my head. So I shaved my head completely. I'd toned my goatee to grow a little bit longer and go sort of into a point. And as I was doing this, as I was looking, it turned out to be somewhat of a rather demonic look just by accident. And I thought, how can I make this better? I need to work on this. So then I injected fake contact lenses in and had my white contacts, which made me look even more demonic. And then I thought, I've got to take it to that one next level because I need to look like this animal. So what I did is I dyed my goatee black and then I put a blonde streak straight down the middle. And then that's where the actual image of the Maniac come from there. It was just a thought process of, how can I make myself look even more meaner?
Yep.
So instead of having the pretty boy look with the hair and all that, with the goatee and the shaved head. And, later on in later years, it manifested into, changing the character somewhat with the tattoos. Mm-hmm. Because there was at one stage where they wanted to turn me heel. And I'd been a face ever since I started. Yep. I'd bash the ref, I'd pull out a chair, I'd hit someone with a chair, I'd do all this sort of stuff, but the crowd would love it just for the fact that there's this big animal monster guy and they're going berserk.
Yeah.
I could not get over as a heel. It just wasn't working. And then, I took a little bit of time off because I think I'd hurt myself. And this is when I was having my son and, the tattoos started from there. And when I came back, I'd had, somewhat of these tattoos back. And I tried the heel thing and it started to work.
Right.
Okay. All it was taking was a bit of an image change than anything else.
Yeah. And it is one of those things, I always say to guys that are still active today, have chats with guys like yourself, guys from down the line, guys that it's coming up. But wrestling is one of those things now that it was a part of, in the Attitude Era, but now it's merged with pop culture. And because they share a lot of the same elements, entertainers and entertainment in some way, shape, or form all have similar shared elements. I feel like, and I say to all the guys, you always have to continually reinvent yourself. And it doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to delete my name and start again. No. It's like the Madonna, it's like the Elton John, it's like the Lady Gaga. Every time, they bring out a new album or it's been a few years, they take a break, they come back, they're always keeping it fresh and keeping it active and keeping it new. Yeah. I mean, Madonna, she's been going for, since late 70s, early 80s. And she's still as, you say her name, everyone knows who it is.
Yeah.
And the image just chops and changes with the time. And wrestling is a similar thing. You'll see guys like back with the Rockers, where Shawn Michaels came out with his blonde hair. Hey, similar to the Maniac back then, had the blonde hair. Nowadays, you look at Shawn, he went through all those changes. The brunette, the sexy boy, the barbershop, all of that, DX, all the way to the Hall of Fame now. Lots of chops and changes in between. So wrestling isn't a stagnant entry. It always needs to consistently swap, merge, change, evolve over time. And so, that initial Maniac look that you're talking about, man, like you say it here because it's true and it is what happened, but I struggle because I've seen what you are and the image of the Maniac that I know. Yeah. Hearing that initial first time, you go, nah, that's not, that didn't happen, man. Like it's always been this, you find that look that works and people just, like I said, like me reacting to it now, it just sounds foreign. It's like, really? Did you? Nah, you've had this look forever, but it's not in a bad way. It's just like this is the look that works.
Yeah, well, people always used to say, I'd kind of look like Satan in the face without the horns, and I tried to figure out a way of how I could bring that into my character. So that's when I came up with the moniker of Hell's Vigilante.
Yeah.
Now, a vigilante is somebody that takes matters into their own hands and does what needs to be done. So I figured calling myself Hell's Vigilante, that makes me Satan's dirty man to do all his dirty work for him. So then I started to come out and my gear would have 666 on it. I'd have the big cross on the back and so on. And that's the moniker came through as Hell's Vigilante, the Maniac, Wayne Mattei. Then the name just grew again and the character got more and more, you know. And ironically enough, I'm sure we'll get to that point, I actually played Satan in a film. So that kind of solidified my character then, because people have gone, you even were Satan in a film. And yeah, man.
It's not a work, it's a shoot.
Absolutely.
So you've had your first, taking it back now, you've had your first go interstate with Sydney. Was it a vastly different experience to that you were used to in South Australia at that point? Did you feel, or was there a lot of similarities? Because as you probably would have experienced, the years that you're doing it and all the traveling you've done, there would be some real friendly locker rooms. Then there'd be those ones where you went, man, I just want to do my job and I want to go home. So was Sydney welcoming? Did it feel familiar, or was it still like a foreign man in a foreign place kind of vibe?
They were reasonably welcoming. I mean, obviously being an interstater, they probably didn't have too many interstaters coming at that stage. But then they're doing their shows in an RSL, and I remember walking through the curtain and going to the ring and looking around, and there were 6 people in the crowd. Whereas I come from the company in Adelaide, where we were, after I debuted, drawing 400 people. So I'm like, shit. Which was a big gear change for me, because I still had to go out there and do what I had to, but in front of, 6 or 8 or 10 people. It was an eye-opener. So that's where the difference was, whereas depending on where you travel to where you go, it was where the crowds were. Melbourne, being a massive wrestling town, would always draw amazingly.
Yep.
Adelaide, in turn, drew really well. Queensland, not bad. Sydney used to pick it up a bit, especially later on. But then I went to Western Australia and I got brought into a company there and became the figurehead of their company for them. And we used to draw amazingly there as well. They did massive shows. So it was different when you go to each state, crowd size, depending on how they would promote the show, what sort of storyline they had, where you were on the card. I mean, look, I ended up, and I mean, not trying to big note myself, I normally ended up in the main event in most states, because putting that big figure there on the poster is what drew people to come.
Right.
The bigger than life superhero, so to speak, regardless of me being Satan's henchman or whatever like that. It was still a character. People wanted to see that character. I never broke character at all. When I was taking photos with people, I'd never smile. I just widened my eyes more so the contacts looked bigger and wider. So I kept that image going almost my entire time so that people would still believe in that character. So
yeah, kayfabe isn't dead, but the Maniac.
Yeah, that's it.
So your first initial run before you had the break, as you mentioned earlier, do you remember how long that was? Was that about 6 years? 2010? Did you stop then?
Yeah, somewhere around there. I did it pretty hard. I'd be traveling every weekend. I'd be away somewhere, and I mean that takes a toll on things. It took a toll on my marriage, but it was what I wanted to do. I remember when I first started, I had a girlfriend back then, and she thought it was the most ridiculous idea ever. She thought, "You're stupid. Why are you doing it? I don't think you should do it." And subsequently, we broke up. Not because of that, but we just broke.
You shouldn't do it. Get out.
Yeah, get out. I cannot talk to you anymore.
I'm putting my contacts in. Leave me alone.
That's right. So yeah, it was a big toll, and then obviously I had my second son, and I wanted to be around more for him. So that's where the foot on the brake came through from there at that point in time.
Right. So wrestling's picking up for you in about the 6 years of the first initial run here. Just briefly, did you have the sort of origins of the shaved head and the contacts before the stop, or did that come on the return?
No, that was before the stop. The stop, absolutely.
So you had settled on the look. The tattoos were beginning at that stage, or they were there?
They were somewhat beginning. I mean, I just had my second son, but then just started to put my boys' names on my arms, and that was the idea behind it. And that was the way I sold it to my mum.
Hey, man, she bought it.
Yeah, she accepted that part, but didn't realise that the name on my forearm went to a whole lot of flames going up my forearms and skulls and God knows what else. And I just said, it just kind of happened, Ma. Sorry.
He went rogue with the needle. There was nothing I could do.
That's it.
So you have the blueprints, sort of a steady foundation now of the Maniac look. You take some time away. Wrestling's playing a big part here in the 6 years. But hey, like we said just before, you're also in charge of a protection company.
Yep.
Did that at any stage have to take a back seat to the wrestling? Did wrestling become more important professionally for you at that stage? Were you thinking, hey, obviously you're doing appearances, doing conventions, getting paid at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Was that, did security work almost take a back seat, or were you still like, okay, I can't do this show because I've got to protect A, B, and C? Was it on equal playing field, or was wrestling sort of starting to overtake a little bit here?
It was reasonably even. I had a pretty good management structure at that time. So I had operations managers, on-road supervisors, all that sort of stuff that I could rely on to take care of that whilst I was off being the, let's call superstar, because that's what they used to say. You go be superstar and we'll look after the business.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, look, when a protection job came up, that was paramount for me. So I would take that and take a step away, whether it was 2-3 weeks or whatever, from wrestling. And they knew that that was my main job and my main focus, because I would get paid 1,000 times more doing that than I would wrestling for that night. So they understood, and that was fine. But, you know, I attempted at that time somehow to approach the WWE, which I did. And I got in contact with a guy called Ty Bailey back then. He was involved with HR with Johnny. And I'd sent through some of my stuff. I sent through photos and all that. And Ty really dug the character. He thought it was great. And because back then they had no one from Australia that had Outback Jack in the 80s, and it was just a goofy character. And then you had bloody the Bushwhackers. Yeah. Again, not selling Australia as the most intellectual either of them. Yeah. So then he's got this big zombie-looking biker that's called the Maniac. That, you know, yeah, look, I was doing a lot of the Undertaker moves because the big man moves, you know, I wasn't technical, so I'm not going to go from a wrist lock to a head lock to a waist lock. You know, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to punch you in the face. That's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And in that time frame, that's, I think, what they were liking and what they were looking for. So it was around Christmas time, and I'd given Ty everything, and Ty was very keen. And Ty said, yep, we'll draw something up for you, and we're going to get it to you to sign, and we'll bring you over, and we'll see how we go. It's fantastic. I was over the moon. Of course. He said, look, we're taking a break due to Christmas holidays and so on. So in the new year, get back in touch with us, and we'll get it started. It's great. No worries. I'm really excited now. Of course. Christmas is done and dusted. And then I go to contact again, and I try to contact Ty on his number, and his number's dead. Okay. All right. So I actually ring WWE head office in Connecticut. Say, hi, I need to talk to Ty Bailey, please. They said, we're sorry, Ty doesn't work here anymore. I've gone, fuck. I said, okay, who's in charge of HR and all that at the moment? And they said, there's a guy called Canyon. And said, we can put you through to him. I said, great, no worries. Got put through to Canyon, told him who I was, asked if he knew who I was and so on. He said, yes, I know who you are. I've seen your stuff. He said, how old are you now? And I think I might have been 27, 28, maybe around there. Yeah. He goes, yeah, look, that's where the problem lies. And I said, okay, what's that? He said, you're too old. Wow. And I said, yeah, the same thing. I said, wow, really? He said, yeah. He said, look, I look for guys in their 20s, 18 to 20. He said, I want people to have longevity on screen. And he said, at your age, I don't feel that you will have that longevity. So he goes, I'm unfortunately sorry. The contract that you had with Ty is gone. Wow. And I was devastated. I couldn't, to be told that the thing that stopped you from getting in was your age, which is something that I can not do anything about. Yep. If they said to me, you wrestled like shit, or you look as crap, or, you know, you're not big enough. Or what, I could change those things and I can work on those things. But when you tell me my age is what has stopped me, then, you know, you're gutted. You can't do anything about it.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, I went back several times and approached and pleaded with Canyon and so on. I got to a point where Canyon said, look, get yourself over to here, get to Florida. We'll give you somewhere to stay. We'll have a look at you. And maybe there's a character we might be able to use you on screen for. I don't know. And I'm like, okay. And then I thought about it. And I thought, you know what? That's an open-ended invitation. There's no promise there of nothing. I could even get there and I wouldn't even have a hotel room. So I figured, nah, I'm going to give up on that idea for them and just think it is what it is. I'm done with that. Keep wrestling here in Australia because then, you know, I still had a big name here. I had a big following. You know, everything was going well here. I figured I'll just do what I do here and that's it. And that's the way I continued, you know. And then obviously later on I got tied in with WWE to do all their personal protection work, which I've done with them now for 20 years. So wow. A lot of guys that are on the roster are my personal friends that I can talk to over their phone. I'm Sheamus, Ryback, you know, all these different guys. I've got to know them on a personal level because when I was working and still work with WWE, I never pushed my wrestling career on them. Actually, I didn't tell them. I didn't tell any of the boys that I was a wrestler or nothing. And I think that is what solidified my relationship with them because they would then find out somehow.
All right, you guys, that's going to do it here for part 1. The interview with the Maniac. I hope it's been interesting so far. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. If you want to follow the podcast, keep up to date with all the episodes and all the special features we got going on, please follow LMBC Podcast at Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter, LMBC_podcast. Thanks so much for listening in, and I'll see you next week.